And one of the groups hardest hit by the coronavirus is seniors, especially those living in long-term care facilities. More than 100 long-term care facilities in Maricopa County have reported at least one case of COVID-19, but we don't know exactly which facilities are dealing with cases or how many they have, as the State Health Services Director, Dr. Kara Christ, won't release those names.
There is state law that requires me to protect people's communicable disease information.
But several Arizona media organizations, including 12 News, are suing the Department of Health Services, arguing this is critical information the public has a right to know, including the name of the facility, the number of cases among staff and residents, and how many people have died. In court documents, DHS argues releasing this information could hurt the facilities, giving them bad publicity. The documents also reveal there is at least one congregate setting where nearly 100% of the patient population tested positive for COVID-19.
This is just not right that we can't be sharing this information.
Families deserve transparency. We need to put families and patients first over facilities.
Lawyers representing DHS insist the information is protected by state law, and any release of information could result in a person's identity being revealed to the public. However, the lawsuit is not asking for the names of the patients. And other states have already taken steps to reveal the names of nursing homes where outbreaks have occurred. Federal health leaders plan to name any long-term care homes licensed by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That information could be released by the end of May.